Good morning. It is 9:14 on April 17th. And welcome to the Flathead Reservation Water Management Board meeting for the record. And we don't have a quorum, but we wanted to discuss a few items, so we'll just pick out topics that we need to discuss today. Go through some discussion. There'll be no action taken today because we don't have a quorum, so given that, we'll do an opening prayer, we'll do one, and then we'll go from there.
Dear Lord, we want to start this day by expressing gratitude to you. Gratitude for this place we live in and this opportunity that we have to serve our community. We want to especially lift up our friend George today and just pray that he has a speedy recovery from his injury. We also ask that as we move through the items ahead of us today, that we do so with wisdom and humility, knowing that we're here to serve. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Georgia. And for the record, at least, even though we don't have a quorum, let's do roll call. Please.
Clayton Matt,
Here.
Roger Noble,
Here.
Georgia Smees, here, Shane Hendrickson,
Here.
and George McLeod and Ken Pitt are both absent.
All right, floor is open, so. Roger, Georgia. What would you like to start?
Well, I guess I would suggest we go ahead. I guess we just can't adopt the agenda because we don't have.
Yeah, there's no action to be taken, so I just want to
We could,
pick a topic and if we got something to discuss,
we could have our budget update. That's just a report.
okay, let's do that.
And just continue on down the agenda of items we can discuss.
Okay. So, with that, we have a budget update.
We have a very basic budget
That's fine.
update. So the budget committee met last week and there's some topics that we're working through. We're pretty well through the PERS review, and we're working towards getting the contributions caught up for members that are missing their contributions from the beginning. We're waiting for Holly with Empower to get back to us to confirm our calculations for loss earnings for late deposits. So that's still pending. There's a few items that we're trying to address. We're getting ready for the second quarter of the budget to get ready to get that presented to the board, or the budget committee and then the board. So that's kind of what I have. And I was going to talk a little bit about the committee compensation, but we're not, obviously we can't take action on it, but there is a committee compensation form in there for March. And if anybody has additional hours to add to that, let me know before next meeting.
Okay. So, with regard to any of the compensation records, get a chance to take a look at it, do so. Yeah.
Nothing I can think of right now.
I think that's probably a good segue into the funding agreements, which I know we do need to talk about, so good to hear about those. So I understand we received funding agreements. Are those funding agreements proposed, or are they agreements that and we just have to prove that? Do you have a Anything on
As far as I know, these are draft.
that? Okay,
The state conveyed these to us with the messaging that it had been through their legal review, and that, you know, if there were no changes from the board, they could be, I'm under the impression that they could just be executed after like removing the draft symbol and giving it back to the parties.
there are, however, some, excuse me, right a minute. Some comments, or at least some highlights.
Yeah,
Yes.
We probably need to talk through those, and then if, Roger, if you have anything in these agreements you want to talk about, let's do so,
yeah.
Roger, I see you have a marked up.
Yeah,
document, So that's, you wanna
I
kick us
think
off?
I caught some similar discrepancies that probably Haley did also. For instance, the funding agreement from the CSKT has dates of September 30th, 2025, and the funding agreement from the DNRC has dates of November 30th, 2025. So I guess we need to reconcile that probably. There was another one that I noticed on the section.
Let's just go ahead and pick those out one at a time, so where are those dates, everybody is aware of?
So section 2 on page 2, under term. And what date should it be?
Well, I guess that's what I was wondering too, if we're doing the calendar year or we doing the fiscal year,
Federal fiscal year.
because they would be different. The
Our-
state and
Our
the tribe.
fiscal, we decided our fiscal year was,
But our fiscal,
That's ours.
yeah, was October 1 through September 30th. So, so I would think it'd be September 30th, and wouldn't it, would be the
That would be my understanding as well.
consistent date, yeah. So the tribal one is correct, the one from the state needs to be fixed.
Well, the other piece about that particular section was and I'd have to look back, did the previous agreement have that language?
it had June 30th,
Mhm.
which is matching their fiscal year.
Well, not the date, but to have the work completed in those dates.
Oh,
I did provide you a copy of the previous funding agreement in your packet for reference, if that's useful.
So the language, so,
And Mr. Chairman, board members, for process wise, is it useful for us to pull this document up and capture the discussion points as track changes as we go through things?
it's probably useful to do that, but of course there'll be no action.
I understand that, but just to try to memorialize the discussion. If you don't mind, Ms. Palmer, that'd be great.
I guess all I'm suggesting is now that I look more closely at it, the board shall have until whatever date to complete the work.
Probably the original one up instead of, these are the ones with Haley's edits.
I can read the plain language, but in practical terms, what does that mean? And what if we don't? Is there anything in the agreement that essentially holds us to that? Or in that language? What if we don't?
it seems like 5 is just, it refers to 5 and 9, right?
Mhm.
So 5 is just our standard, what we do. And then 9 is a reporting date. We'll submit a report by November 30th.
Yeah, so the completion of work is essentially continuing to use the funds for the upkeep of the board in the office. That's section 5. And then section 9 is the reporting responsibility.
I guess, and on that, I had, the last sentence of number 5, to board submit future budget requests to the tribe on an agreed upon schedule. Is that just then the 60 days that we report after the end of the quarter? And that's in number 9, and I guess that's when we were meeting with them, they had conceded to go to quarterly reporting instead of monthly reporting. And they were gonna give us 60 days to get back to them, so that was all good. That was taken into consideration and put into these agreements, so that was a good faith demonstration. Just, I guess that would be what the schedule refers to.
I think section 5 actually is for future funding requests. So like if there was an additional budget item, and I mean, it'd be good to clarify it because I read it differently. So I thought that this was in reference to, as the board moves forward and perhaps they want to discuss money for a building or discuss a future budget augmentation, that's what I thought 5 was referencing. And again, maybe some clarity would be good on that.
No, I agree. I think it's pretty vague. And I would prefer there to be something maybe a little bit more structured on that. It is for future budgeting requests. So for example, if the board was inclined to request additional funds from the legislature, I would assume that would be part of a future budget request. So what would the parties like that to look like? I think that needs to be more defined because we've had a lot of gray area and now we actually have people in place to have the black and white for them. So I would prefer there to be a little bit more structure on that language.
So maybe, thinking about it though, maybe the language in there is adequate, but we separately come to agreement on what that schedule is and how they do it. That's maybe an appendix to this or something.
It could be, yep, could be as simple as that.
So that would be my suggestion, that we need to, because the language is in both the state and the tribal agreement.
It's been in every single funding
Yeah.
agreement so far, yeah.
So they're not really raising any issue with it, but if we want to have it defined, what do we suggest? Do you have recommendations on what that should be? So let's talk about, so it says the board will submit future budget requests to the tribe or state on agreed upon schedule. So are we talking about annual or are we talking about biannual? It's the state going
Think it,
in 2 years.
I think with, relative to the state, I think we'd have to get in front of their legislative cycle. And so maybe we propose whatever that date is by the time you have to get a bill entered into the process. So maybe we suggest to them that we add some language to that effect. And I don't know how the tribal council works, if they have a funding schedule or not, so.
So in this budget would be for anything beyond our general operation and maintenance funds that they already provide us.
Right.
So this is like for the new building, for example. We would ask for a budget for a new building in both the tribe and the state.
So that's your interpretation of what that means.
Yeah, because we're already, in the next line down, 6 describes our budget.
Right.
That we're gonna get that on an annual basis. So to me, 5 is alluding to anything above that, that we want to, it's a special budget, if you will. Is what 5 is referring to in my mind.
Yeah.
To clarify that language, is there something we can add to this sentence, like future supplemental? Or is that necessary?
I think the language is fine. I think if we wanted to have or propose like an agreement to attach to this though, that does talk about that process of maybe a special budget request. That would be fine. I think it should be annual, right? So it should be for the next year. We can have specific language for the states though, with regard to how would we want to provide a future budget for the legislative session specifically. But I don't think that we should limit it to just biannual. For the states, it should be an annual process.
Maybe, or maybe we also make that an addendum to this.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that we couldn't sign this and execute it
Right.
before that, right? But we could go back to the parties and say,
Once
we
it's
would
in
like
place,
to provide an
Now let's
addendum. Yeah.
work out on
Exactly.
that schedule and
Yeah.
those dates, yeah.
Yeah,
That sounds fair. Thoughts, Roger?
No,
I
it's
see the
good,
wheels turning.
good approach. Yeah, if you might just put an addendum to that, that'd be fine.
Okay. So I make note that that's what we want to do, so.
Mhm.
Okay.
So I'm gonna jump to 9, that since it's
Mhm.
referring to 9. It says in the state one, it's talking quarterly, but then wants a final in November, which is off the quarter. And I would
Yeah.
move that to end of December, to align with the final. And it comes in line with the tribal side.
Yeah.
I don't want to do an extra report
agreed,
in between quarters.
agreed.
Yeah, very much agree.
Good point.
Yeah. No, I think it's aligning those two
Yeah,
is appropriate. Yeah, yeah, because the tribes within 60 days of the close of the fiscal year, whereas the states has by November 30th.
Even though we don't have a forum, is someone keeping track of our suggestions here?
Yeah, I guess I would suggest that Haley and Ethan prepare a response. This is a draft.
Yep.
So we can prepare a response to it, so
Yep.
might as well.
Yep.
Have you guys work through it,
Well,
a response.
that's what I was looking for, thank you. All right, next section.
I had just a question on section 6. They both are contributing the 570,500. That is a total of 1,141,000. In this, they refer to 1,360,632.
We'll take that one. Bigger.
Is that just a carryover from the previous
Yeah, so.
funding cycle is my question.
What it looks like they're doing is they're taking our budget that we gave them. And since our budget for this fiscal year was a little higher, they're saying we're accepting your budget, but we're only funding it this much and that you're gonna use your vacancy and your carryover. And that's how it's worded to me. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, because it says expenses, estimated expenses versus the actual. Expense, yeah.
Yeah. So they're approving it, I guess, that's the language I'm reading this.
Yeah, it's kind of just what I wanted clarification on.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that, yeah, I see where that 219,632 is on our budget we submitted to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
and 7 interesting.
Mhm.
I get why it's there, but it's a bigger problem if that ever comes to
Mhm.
fruition.
I don't know, can you do anything with that?
There's not anything
Not
anybody's gonna
really.
be able to do with that.
I don't know what to do about that.
Number 7.
7.
Oh,
No, I think it's just something to be very aware of.
We've been operating that way, since day one.
I think, I don't know about the state, but I think historically, many of the tribal programs are, especially when there are agreements, there's language in there somewhere that says subject to available funding. The funding will be there's in the program,
And,
but that rarely happens that way. It's just a, I think it's just a safety valve for them, the funding agency.
Do they include similar language in all of their appropriation agreements? Or is this specific to the?
Like I said, like, been a while, but I think I recall, similar language says something like subject to available funding. I don't know, maybe Shane has got some insight too, because I think working with the tribes, you probably see those agreements more directly.
Yeah, I think that's fairly standard language because the state and the tribes are sort of really running an appropriation. State's different because they're on a 2-year funding cycle, or tribes might be on a 1-year funding cycle. But the point is that money is appropriated on 1 or 2 year, that you can't guarantee money in 1 year to the minute until it's appropriated. And that's a very common federal out, if you will, is this is a 5-year agreement, if you will, but at any given year, that Congress could not pass a budget. So we can't obligate the federal government for funds that hasn't appropriated yet. So that's a common language, but it's a good reality check that, you know.
And for the tribal programs, it's strictly even tribal dollars, the annual funding. I mean, I remember years, sequential years where we had to prioritize. And, basically cut our budgets to a certain percent. And go with what funding's made available. Imagine that's true of the college as well. Yes. While you're working in other sections.
The only thing I thought about, that I've seen in other agreements, section 14, indemnify and liability is strictly towards the board will indemnify. There's oftentimes joint indemnification. Is that worth considering?
I would caution against it with this type of funding.
Remember section 13? Since we're off the record, right?
We're on the record, we're just not.
Well, we're on there, yeah, but we're not recorded, we're not.
We're not taking action, no, we're recording.
We are recording.
Yeah, that's fine, I guess section 13 and the federal side, we are removing and required to remove that kind of language. I don't know if that has bearing here, because the funds are from the tribe and the state, but any federal funds, any reference to an illusion of DEI is being stricken in the documents.
Well, from my standpoint, based on that, both parties have proposed language. So,
Yeah. And
unless they decide.
just
that it's an
bringing it
issue,
up.
No, I mean, it's an interesting note because the tribal contribution is from federal money through the Settlement Act. So it is an interesting consideration. But
I forget the executive order is 14. 112 or something like that. Requires that.
But is it our obligation to raise that back to them? They propose this.
Yeah, I mean, I would be concerned if we're a signatory to it, that maybe the agreement, there could be, potential for the agreement to essentially dissolve because of it. I would just be concerned about it. It would just be a question back to them. I'm fine with the language.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just
No,
saying what's going
No,
on.
and I appreciate it, is that that's something that I didn't even think about.
It's a good point, but are we certain all of the state funding is state?
The state money is state funds, yes.
100%. So maybe backdoor, you could just reach out to
That's fine, yeah.
the or federal staff and just say, you know, I'm not sure here, but this one there. Make sure you want to keep that language in there.
I can do that.
So yeah, my recommendation is not to do anything, I guess, it just making an awareness of that in other federal NEPA documents or whatever, that has been removed by executive order.
So they have done it. Across the board.
in this Humboldt University.
So nobody ever talks about it, but the opposite of that acronym is UUE. Uniformity, unfairness, and exclusion. Right? So by removing that, you are by inference accepting a UUE policy, which anyway, I'm just complaining. Right now.
I mean, legally, it's discrimination in itself, so,
Yeah,
for the removal of it, so.
yeah,
But
here we are.
it is what it is. I did have a comment on 11, section 11 for the state's contract. They proposed extra language in that section, the tribes did not, regarding public access to records. I would just like limiting language on that to be public access to, records pertaining to the funding agreement. The board has other policies in place for public access to its own records. So I would just propose there be a little limiting language on that section.
Which sentence are you?
So it's the second paragraph in section 11.
Okay. Oh, I see.
I mean, the board has either policies itself or the ordinance, language that specifically requires public access to records like decisional documents, meeting documents, everything like that. As far as it in the funding agreement, I'm fine with it being in there. I just want it to be limited to records pertaining to the funding agreement.
It does make it interesting when there's a mix of funds.
I am dense today. Walk me through this again.
Okay, so the second paragraph in section 11.
Is it paragraph?
Yep,
On the state.
on the state's contract.
It's all one paragraph.
So then you're probably on the tribes.
Yeah, this is the states, there's a second.
Ah. There you go. I was against it.
One more topic.
Yes.
I think that's right, yes.
Get rid of funding.
I see, okay.
Agreement.
Yeah. Public access to records. More for public access. And you're suggesting,
So Cindy actually typed out what, I was talking about. I'd rather it not be a broad sweeping declaration, in the funding agreement in particular, because the ordinance and the policies that the board adopted already have that responsibility on the board. So I'd rather this be pertaining to this funding agreement. especially because the tribes and the state decided to do two separate agreements as well.
How does that change how it affects it? It sounds the same to me.
How I interpret that second paragraph without the language there is that they're putting a requirement, essentially telling the board that it needs to have public access to all records. We already know this. I don't think it's
Yes.
the place to put it in the funding agreement. If you wanna have, it's already in the ordinance, the board already has adopted policies on that.
Yeah.
So that's why I want in here that it's fine to have public access, but as to the records pertaining to this agreement. So for example, all of the budgets that we propose in public meeting, perfect.
Fair.
Does the second sentence of that paragraph need to be there? Done? Doesn't matter.
That's again, just, it's that broad requirement to have public access to documents.
Okay,
I don't think it's appropriate for the state to be putting that in a funding agreement.
yeah, so I thought.
Okay, I'm a little less dense now. Thank you.
You can do, instead of deleting it, so you just add that same language pertaining to the agreement right after public access in that sentence.
Or the agreement or this agreement?
As far as this document, the four corners of it, it would be the agreement. Mhm.
So
Yeah,
there's a
you're
difference
right.
between that and this.
This implies that you're referring to other documents outside of the four corners of this document.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so I guess even as you said, and that's maybe where I was a little also confused, is we have a public access policy as it is.
Yes,
So that is a section of city law.
agreed. I'm fine to keep it in there, but that's why I wanted to add the language.
Okay,
Because we aren't saying that, I mean,
Sure.
there's an inherent responsibility as a public entity. We acknowledge that.
Sure.
That's why we have policies on it. But, yeah,
is there any further discussion? Maybe we just say, page refer to our public access.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm good with that.
Did we hit on all your highlight items? Yeah.
I think that's all I have to.
All right. Anything else? Anything else? All right. Thank you. We'll get back and answer to a couple questions and new draft that the board can take action on. We propose that.
we can do that.
Now, the only thing there is, we need these funding agreements in place to get our money. And we need that soon, I take it, right? The budget's kind of,
Mr. Chairman, board members, yeah, we're down to, I think, $308,000 for total cash flow and got multiple pending bills, and this is, this is something to get done. I will, in doing the best that I can to accommodate things, I'll plan on, unless you redirect me, responding, to the distribution email that I got for the two funding agreements from Payla and Melissa with the track change. Line items, fixed for each document, posing a question on, on the equal employment, section 13. And then urge expedited review of those limited items, a copy, at least you two on that communication, and Haley, of course. Does that sound like a good approach for moving things forward, or would you like to see something different?
I think that's fair, but the number of transmission there is, should probably be the full board.
Okay,
Of course, there's no action on this, so my question is if we need action. At what point do we need action, and if we don't want to wait until the next meeting, regular meeting, can we take care of this through email exchange?
This action would be public. It would need to be in an open meeting.
Yeah.
So, what do we,
the editing portion or the approval of the agreements after a back and forth? I just want to make sure I understand which portion you're
are we
talking about.
okay to submit the edited comments without action?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Staff can act on behalf of the board,
okay,
you know, even though we've had some discussion.
okay.
Uh,
So
we
based on what
were,
we've talked about today, you can do that.
Mhm.
Okay. The only other part though was on the equal employment stuff. And unless you think it's okay to put it in writing, I almost thought it'd be better just to have that conversation and see where we're at before we.
Yeah, I'll personally reach out to Melissa.
So just.
okay,
that's all.
we'll
That'll be
limit
my-
that component of the communication that I'll plan for this afternoon, then, okay?
So as far as scheduling goes, I guess maybe the next meeting is tentatively scheduled for April 30th. I think you probably got enough money in your budget to carry through until then, so that we could have a final by the next meeting, then we could act on it then.
Yeah,
I think that's reasonable.
yeah, if we're looking at, yeah, I mean, we're in the next one.
I would suggest that, we get something to them, tomorrow. They're going to be in, the next section is legal updates, so. This is a segue. You didn't catch that.
That's pretty smooth.
Thank you.
I see.
I think we should get that out to them by tomorrow because they're going to be in evidentiary hearings all next week,
Oh,
the
yeah.
following week and the week after that. So legal counsel will be very, very busy.
Regarding the compact,
Yes. And myself, I will also be in a trial next week, so I would like to get this taken care of tomorrow.
And just to reiterate what my plan was, after this meeting is done, I was thinking you and I would just take care of this communication this afternoon.
If we don't still have an executive session,
Okay,
and I'm happy to.
We might still have an executive session. It won't be too long though.
Okay.
so more legal update.
Yeah. So just continuing on that, so yes, next week, the compact parties will be, in court. They'll be starting their evidentiary hearings first in Missoula next week. The following week will be in Folsom and the final week will be in Kalispell. So the reason why they're doing different, venues is to accommodate the different objectives in the valley. So those who are maybe farther south can go to the Missoula location, and those who are farther north can go to Kalispell. And those in between can go to Folsom. So court's really trying to just hear everybody out, on maybe some lingering evidentiary issues. Compacting parties went through a very truncated discovery process for this. It was very rapid, very heavy. There were discovery requests that I looked over just to make sure on some things. I also noticed that they were calling for depositions of individuals. Again, this is just hear anything from anybody with regard to yourselves, please talk to me after this meeting. So we can talk about that, but other than that, we're just gonna sit back, listen, see what happens with that. As far as good news though, with the compact litigation, I sent you all the order that the judge issued a couple weeks ago, the large, like 78 page order. As far as from the board's perspective, it is a good order. The judge actually went through quite a bit, to discuss the history of all these different types of water rights that are within the jurisdiction of the board, and found that the board has the authority under the ordinance and the compact. The part that I am most pleased with is his discussion of the judicial review process. That's something that is, I mean, even just from compacting parties standpoint and their arguments on it, it was still kind of just, it's an ambiguous term. Of, you know, what is a court of competent jurisdiction? But the water court found that there was sufficient judicial review within the ordinance, and it's a good win for the board, so.
I read it, I thought it was very favorable, and very well written, too, you know, so.
It's pretty dense.
Well, they went into a lot of history, and I finally understood what the winner's doctrine is now, you know, so it was worth reading, if for no other reason.
For some reason, I didn't, so.
Okay.
You could just resend.
Sure, yeah.
I would have recalled that.
Yeah, that's a good read.
Yeah, sit down with like a cup of tea or coffee or something. Yes, I can resend it to you.
Can you send us the dates when those public meetings will be?
The evidentiary hearings?
Yeah.
I am unaware that they will be open to the public.
Oh,
I'm not sure on that. The whole process has been, so there might be a Zoom link to stream it, but I'm not sure because these are actual like, objector parties and the compact parties have time slots that they're gonna be presenting their arguments, and evidence in different time slots. So I'm not sure on that, but I can find out. And if I see a link or anything, I can forward it to you all, in case you're interested. I know the first day next week. So April 22nd, I believe they start on a Tuesday. The first party to argue will be the party that had the most contentions against the board. So just interesting placement for them.
Who's that?
Seago Slack. They're up, by the way. Sorry. For other water court updates, 76 LJ, I sent this around, is open. The adjudication process is open in that basin. Nothing really to report other than, you know, the office has questions on those. A lot of the water right holders are receiving or should have already received that informational document that says that this basin's now open, the objection process ends on such and such dates, like mid-August. And then there's an informational meeting both on Zoom and in Kalispell next month on that basin. Again, that's a water court process. It is not the Office of the Engineers process, just to put that out on the record.
Yeah, I'm positive there are people that are gonna be confused about.
Yep, there will probably be questions, so.
I thought I had a lot of right away. Some people don't.
It's confusing, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces, so that's why we're doing this, so we can
Yeah.
also communicate it to the public too, so. That's what I have for water court. I can move into a little bit of the legislature. Unfortunately, I don't have too much to report on this. Or fortunately, however you wanna look at it. There were bills that were introduced regarding exempt wells, that came directly from the Horseshoe Hills decision, sometime last year. We talked about that when we were deciding the, maximum annual diverted what is it, diverted volume, cumulative diverted volume, something like that, right? The state calls it combined appropriation. So that came from that. They proposed language on how to assess combined appropriation from that decision. That was killed on the floor. So no traction on that, which is probably a good thing because it would make everything very complicated again. There were two bills that were introduced regarding the water court. One was a bill to essentially solidify them and in continuation, and then also propose some divisional water courts. So in certain areas of the state, there might be these little, like, kind of smaller feeder water courts to then go to the main water court, essentially taking any sort of water court disputes out of the district courts, mainly because of the lack of understanding from district judges and understanding what a decree might look like and enforcing a decree. So that bill has been tabled. The other one was to abolish the water court. And that one has been tabled. So,
And that one was tied to the state lands.
yeah. Yep. So as far as I know, those are not going to get anywhere right now with only a couple.
It's getting pretty
Weeks
late in
left,
the
so.
session, yeah.
That's pretty much all I had on that. There are some others, like very small tweaks on some very finite areas of water law, like in the statutes, there's a bill on the change process, so the change applications. That one right now, I believe, is in front of a committee waiting to go to the floor. So I'll keep an eye out on that one. Typical ones that come up every year, there's the temporary lease bill of water that's being proposed again. That was something that DNRC allowed for a long time. What sunsetted, meaning that nobody picked it back up at the date it was supposed to die, and it's now being reintroduced. So that one looks like it's gonna go to the governor's desk.
Is that the one on the state lease land stuff?
No, so the temporary lease of water is essentially where you can have like a portion of water to use for just a temporary time and for a temporary
Like
purpose.
for construction?
Yeah,
So what about the one on the, it just always slipped my mind.
the state lease.
Yeah. the state
Yeah,
lease
that's the
land.
one I was talking about with the abolish the water court.
Oh,
So
that was
that's,
part of that.
yeah.
Introduce that.
Oh, I can't remember. Lear, maybe? Yeah, I think so. That's what I got.
You,
Other than we're now in the briefing process, both parties received the board's appeal notice on briefing, and so they have that time length to submit briefs to contact email, which will then be distributed to me and I'll distribute it to you all. Then we'll go from there. So the board's decision, briefing first, and then if the briefing doesn't clarify anything, potential argument.
yeah, that was good. I mean, your approach, I like, because I was ready to go to all argument. Doing that way it helps. Okay.
Yep.
Office of the water engineer, anything you want to cover, Vincent?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, board members, in your packet, the first thing I'll bring to your attention would be the standard water rights report update. Just, I know you guys like to see what the office has been doing, so this is thank you, Sydney, putting this together. just to kind of keep you abreast of what's going on with the water rights work. I will, let you know that staff has been run pretty ragged with, complicated water right challenges, a lot of training, a lot of trying to move forward with past, temporary actions that were done in the interim and trying to get that loaded now into the water rights database because we have, a lot of functionality now, provided to our office through the water rights database. And so everybody's going through kind of a relearning curve on, the MO for how to handle new applications coming in, how to, backtrack to old actions that we've done and make sure that we commemorate those appropriately in the database. And, facing some of the challenges that you might expect as we go forward, which is, trying to work towards standardized approaches, so that we have the appropriate remarks, we have the appropriate volume considerations, we have all of these, items that are, essential to try to keep, consistent on as we move forward so that we're not inadvertently issuing permit exceptions for amounts that are higher than they would normally be allowed or otherwise out of compliance, so that we identify when there's shared well agreements, or shared wells used between multiple parcels, that kind of information. You have any questions on that front? Okay. We can also thank, Ms. Palmer for putting, and the rest of the staff for populating things, but we have, an updated, traffic report. So, I hope that you continue to find this interesting. Do keep in mind that the April number is, we're only at about half of April. So, but we thought, hey, we've got a meeting today, we might as well, let you know what we've seen so far. And then, new for this, report, you're gonna see a bar chart started up that, kind of compares where we were at in, March with April. And so as time, goes on, you'll be able to see month to month, what kind of walk-in and phone call, activity you see. And so, note that in March, we handled 45 in-person walk-ins and 87 phone calls for water right, support. Everyone with its own story. Some could get addressed right there. Some took meetings to figure out what to do about.
Just out of curiosity, it's a typical, I mean, I know they're all various, but really most of your walking and the phone calls.
Sure. So, a primary, item that we address is either for people selling property or realtors representing people selling property that want to know what's the status of their pending or suspended water right and whether or not we can push that forward. And, in the past, we had been, pushing forward on those, and issuing an interim product, which is kind of, we create an in-house certificate of water right. At this point, we're very close to the finalized steps that are going to need to occur for us to just do that reporting right through the database. And so I've been trying to push off, things as best I can, only handling the most essential issuances. And if there's ways to handle things through, a communication to get us past that bump, I've been doing that so that we can just have that efficiency of using the database the way that it was intended to have the certificates issued from there, which then also commemorates things and puts it into the online database. And in fact, at present, you can go on to the water rights query system and you can see our domestic allowances, you can see our stock allowances, and those are up forward and live. And I expect that by the end of the month, we will have the same ability to expedite those suspended and pending state-based registrations, so that those are all just gonna, as soon as we hit them, they're all gonna go through the issue process, and they'll be right there as a public online record. And the issuances will look like what you've seen here as a board, like when you remember back when we had the draft, this is what a water right's gonna look like, and they'll look like that. And if there's interest, we can have a refresher and let you see what the abstracts and the issuance documents will look like. But there's a lot of little details that go through there on how you handle all the elements of each water right. And there's been a lot of back and forth about the permissions aspects between our office and the DNRC. And so, you know, I'll talk a little bit more about Wyrus in a second, but we're getting very close to, you know, a 90% product. The other big thing that we see is people coming in with,
Well, I was just gonna ask you while you're still on
Sure.
water rights.
yeah,
So the CIIT had that stock water funding appropriation. Are you starting to see applications
Sure.
from that, or what's the status?
sure, that's a great question. And, you know, and I'll just jump real quick because it circles in, you know, I have a bullet on that. And so what had happened is they got a little behind in their funding review process. And so the meeting that they had planned to have here at this office this last Monday has now been moved to next Monday. And so next Monday, we will be hosting the CITT, some folks from CITT, and any of the applicants who wanted to come in and do a twofer to handle their grant application acceptance work with the CITT folks, and also possibly just apply for their stock allowance right here. We've got that set up for next Monday, okay? And so that is a longer way of leading into no, because they haven't, it's coming. Now we have, I am pleased to say that Blair Libby with DNRC has volunteered. He's on this call even. He's volunteered to help us with some technical aspects of what we expect to be 80 or so, you know, new applications coming in. So we're trying to gear up, doing the best that we can with what we've got, and trying to set up public with a one-stop shop in coordination with CITT folks. And so stock water is one of the other big things that we've been answering. You know, to that point. And then there's been some development domestic allowances, and we've got two have been applied for. And then we've had a lot of other discussion, because now we're at a point where we've got the parameters kind of all set up. And if you're wanting to do something, you can come in and get some certainty. And so I think there's a lot of people out there working towards you know, moving things forward with their development domestic allowances. We continue to get questions from folks about changes and new permits, you know, and at present, a lot of those end up kind of limited, because they had the idea that they wanted a permit, and then I would explain that we have some policy development to do, but that in no way on the other end of the policy development would there be something less than a public notice and objection process, which is, you know, oftentimes people will shy away when they understand that that larger commitment to move through something that has to go through a noticing cycle. That said, though, I have tried to encourage people that, you know, we're excited to work on the policies and and invite them along if they'd like to, see what the board's gonna be working on and, chime in.
So I guess that's my segue then, to ask. Speak, anything that's gonna go through public notice and objection is gonna be a full-blown permit. And so it's been a year now since we had that letter from Ed Meese with the city of Polson asking when we were gonna have that in place and to be for the, for the cities and municipalities to apply for a water right and to get caught up because they've been on hold since 1991. And we told them that we'd get back to them within 6 to 12 months. So we're at 12 months. So are we at a point we can start? You got additional staff now. Can we start developing the policy on those things?
Mr. Vice Chairman, I'm super excited to start developing the policy. We have dipped our toe into some of the policies just this week to start kicking things off. And I will, not to overwhelm the board here, I will let you know that there's multiple policy fronts that we need to address. So we've got the municipality permits and permits as a whole. I am very aware that the municipality permits is the priority on the permitting from the board's perspective. We have the changes. We also have got to develop some policies for the state-based registrations so that we'll have some clear guidance. There's a couple of spots that I'll be highlighting for the board to make some decisions about for moving forward with state-based registrations. We'll have a similar line item for the tribes registrations. We have groundwater management areas, which is, going to be a challenge for us all because those will be before you, petitions for that. And we are actively right now implementing the policy for the Flathead System compact water, which I believe is going to be an educational step for us because that will be this office's first recommended decision process, right? Because it's not quite the same as a permit, but it does go through a recommended decision. Then a excuse me for bubble gum in my mouth there, recommended decision to grant or recommended decision to grant with modifications would then go out through a public notice process, which will be our first public notice process for recommended decision. I suspect that we will learn a little bit as we go through that process that will help us anchor the permitting effort in some past experience. I'm hoping that it's not too outside of where I think we're at, because that's always tough when that happens, but it is moving forward. Having that first findings of fact, conclusions of law, recommended decision will really help us to have an anchor point, I think, for the permitting for the change process.
Okay, so just to follow up a little bit too. So on the groundwater permitting for municipal wells and whatnot, we had hoped to have a hydrogeologist on board, but that didn't happen. But the DNRC has offered, and the offer is still on the table, to have Attila Fogarty assist your office with developing the groundwater policy. And Attila worked in new appropriations for at least 10, 12 years, I know. So he has a really extensive background. He's under the compact division now. So if you would like some help, please reach out to Pela, because he is an excellent resource, So, anyway, just something to consider. So
The discussions we've had with municipalities in the past, their concern about where this stands is Are they thinking new wells? What are they,
Well,
cause they've got claims on the book, I'm sure. Well, I'm just not sure how much more development these wells are really.
well, they, you know, everybody, I mean, drilled wells, well, that CID ruling was in effect. You know, the Ronan, Pablo, Olson, and I don't know who else, you know, have drilled wells, but now they need to get a permit.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, and I know there's a number of, tribal subdivisions out there that are in the same situation, so, it all is relative to getting this groundwater permitting in place.
If they drilled wells during that process, though, those documentations would have been in the state record that have been transferred to us too, is that correct?
No, those, Mr. Chairman, board members, any of the, permits that were applied for, in that CID period did not make it. They did not make it in through the compact gateway. The registration process for what was allowed to be brought forward on state-based water rights was really limited to the pre-73 exempt uses, 602 groundwater certificates and 605 stock water certificates. So permits, changes, I do know there were some, they have all kind of withered on the vine to follow. I mean, we have a spreadsheet of them, but it needs to be, it's a start from scratch process. And I suspect we're gonna have a very different looking, process for municipalities, but, I might learn something as we move through this process, here with you board members. And I know that even from when the state received those to today, their process changed significantly. So during the negotiations, it was DNRC regional managers who said there wasn't really a good way to bring those forward because when they had been applied for, it was under such a different set of permit criteria than what was present even in that was like 2010.
That criteria has changed, but it didn't change immensely. And a lot of those applications were based on, change applications too, or not change applications, but, replacement wells, they were calling them. And so the DNRC, there is a list, like Ethan said, of those. And all of these municipalities are interested in coming into compliance, so that's kind of where it's at.
I mean, we can do replacement wells today.
Yeah, but they don't count as replacement.
Okay.
And you know that, I mean, that's why there's urgency in getting this going.
So, furthermore, the other thing that we have the most, contact about is small, non-authorized surface water uses off Flathead Lake. We get calls about those often, where somebody has a pump and they're irrigating a orchard or a patch of ground, and they are interested in getting into compliance. And they, are there to apply for some kind of a little exception, and they get the same bad news that anybody would get anywhere else in the state, that there's no permit exception for that kind of surface water use. And just be aware that there's and furthermore, my other public outreach thing beyond the CITT is I did yesterday talk to a bunch of nice realtors in Polson, and they brought this same issue up as is there going to be something to address that? You know, and I was like, well, at present, it would be something along the permit process. You know, that is obviously somebody who has a small patch of green and a little pump off of the lake is typically not super interested in going through the full blown permit process, but, so, that's another common call. Lately, we've not seen much for anybody, calling with complaints or water supply issues, but water shifting.
Surely.
Yep. So, I hope that helps give you an idea on, the water rights and the traffic, updates and, a little public outreach. The next item I have for you is, staffing or recruitment updates. We do have, an active hydrogeologist, recruitment occurring. We have 3 eligible candidates. I have copies of resumes for you today. And, I will be interested in scheduling interviews, expeditiously. So, I am proceeding with, the assumption that we'll be using the same hiring team as before. So are you still all right? Just want to double check
Yeah.
you're available and you're interested. Okay, good deal. On the wireless front, you know, like I mentioned, we have a lot of the database is coming together. We have April, you know, expected improvements that would include our office gaining the ability to edit, you know, state-based water right versions under the jurisdiction of the board, to edit, add new versions for state-based water rights that are under the jurisdiction of the board, to fully address state-based registrations, to fully address pending ownership updates. That's the next and into the final workload is ownership updates. You know, I should probably wait till the chairman comes back. Yeah, sorry. I'll wait on ownership updates until the chair comes back.
So I guess while we're got a little time, I'd be available next week if you want to schedule some interviews, and then I'm gonna be gone for about a week, and then I'll be back. So that's kind of my schedule for availability.
I'm just gonna stick that in my calendar and see what I can do.
That's great news that we have 3 applicants.
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear that.
We had more application submissions. You'll remember that discussion I had about the bots and things, but we have winnowed those down to the ones who actually applied to the letter of our application standards set forth on the website. So that was educational for us. But I think we've overcome it. We've got 3 that have applied.
Anxious to take a look at it.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I almost started talking without you, and so I tried to backtrack a little bit. I was given a virus update. You heard some of that before. We've really got a lot of the database together here in April. We expect to be able to edit versions of state-based rights under the board's jurisdiction, to edit by adding a new version also to state-based water rights that are under the board's jurisdiction. Working towards editing original versions of state-based rights that are under the board's jurisdiction. We are expecting to be able to fully address the state-based registrations and be able to, move those forward. Again, this is all focused on the database functionality. We have got, pending items still, regarding, ownership updates. And we're gonna have to, at some point, re-engage that aspect. You'll remember the complexity of ownership updates, because there's, the state holds the jurisdictional charge for doing the ownership updates for all water rights that have a place of use on the state, on fee simple lands, excuse me. Whereas the compact ordinance contemplates the board and the tribes coming up with something to address ownership updates on tribal trust properties. And so that was one of the more complicated things that we decided to kick the can down the road and take care of the lion's share of what we could get done on the database. And so we're almost at not being able to kick the can down the road anymore. And similarly, the other big pending item will be, talking about how much access DNRC has to board type water rights. And they'll need to have some abilities to make edits, to do ownership updates to those rights. And we'll probably want to have some types of controls that are similar to the controls that our office would be having, so that we can't go in and manage board jurisdiction rights, such as those off the reservation. So it's good news, is what I'm getting at. And I'm thinking by the end of May, we'll be down to little problems.
So I guess, that is good news. So relative to that, Kathy Schubert and James were kind of working a lot on virus stuff. Are they wrapping up though? I thought their contracts, when do they expire?
Kathy is not interested in working past May, the end of May. And so I don't know if I'd say her contract expires. She's that's where she's drawn the line. James is willing to stay on for other tasks as assigned, and that I think there could be some real benefit to our organization of having that resource in the wings.
More good news. I am actively trying to collect any good news I can get this week, so keep it coming.
All right.
Roger's question though, they're about complete with what? I understand what you're asking. You're asking what status, where they're at with the virus cards?
Yeah, I think you said they're pretty far along with it. It's all gone pretty well.
We're very much hoping that by the end of May, all but the little stuff will have been addressed. The hiccup with ownership updates is hard to predict. So, that one I can't fully iron that out, and there will be some latent smaller items that'll need to be addressed in the long haul. That would be separate to this priority work that's happening right now.
Why don't you explain for the board? I know how it works, but for the other board members, what triggers an ownership update? And how it currently occurs, so that everybody has an understanding.
Sure. An ownership update, as written out in the ordinance, in the compact, to be, the ones that occur on fee land. The jurisdiction for those is retained under the DNRC, because the DNRC has close ties to the other state agency, Department of Revenue, that manages property transfers for purposes of tracking property taxes. And so when property transfer is filed with DOR that assigns the new ownership to fee land, then you can know that that geocode associated with the parcel that's changing ownership also has the water rights associated with that parcel tied to the geocode. So geocode, which is that unique parcel identifying number, is what really helps the state track who owns what parcel. And years ago, there were no geocodes associated with water rights, and it was a Herculean effort by the state of Montana to go through and painstakingly assign the linkage to move beyond what water rights had, which was just a legal land description, to this unique identifier that is easy to look up in something like the cadastral online system. So during the negotiation phase, there was a lot of effort put forward to just maintain that good record keeping, because it's so difficult when a water right is got poor ownership records to move forward with a lot of things, including adjudication, because the tie to the ownership is also a tie to the mailing address. And so when you wanted, when the water court used to have to go out and do an outreach for a decree, the amount of return mail was excessive because people who they thought owned water rights just did not own the water rights. So
Maybe I'll get here.
Sure.
For a second. So what occurs when a property changes hands is they fill out, the realtor and part of the title company fills out what's called an RTC, which is a realty transfer certificate. It's something that was developed a little while back, so that when that piece of ground changes hands, the water right stays with the piece of land, but it gets updated to the new owner. So that, like Ethan was saying, that RTC is then tied to a geocode, which is tied to Department of Revenue's records for tax purposes. So the DNRC is interlinked very closely with the Department of Commerce on this, so that it becomes a smooth transition. It didn't used to be before they had this. There would be a lot of water right ownerships that never occurred. They'd be in the old owner's name, and you couldn't even find it if you searched it. So that was created to make sure that process occurs. So anyway, you can continue. So I just want to take.
Sure. And so now we understand the premise of why the state of Montana was, slated to retain those ownership updates, because record keeping wise, it would have been much more difficult to have this organization have that tie to the RTCs and through Department of Revenue. But then at the same time, these ownerships on trust lands had a long-term lingering issue as well, where they really didn't fit in the DNRC's ownership update shoebox. And so that's why there is a little bit of a separation, because nobody's filling out RTCs for ownership changes on trust lands. They're looking at TSRs and other types of documentation of surveys that tie the properties themselves to the water rights. And so that, I hope that helps to give a little context. Now I'll talk a little bit about a few of the wrinkles. There are these two activities that need to often occur with water rights. One is a divided interest or a split, and the other is a sever. And so a divided interest will be, there was an 80-acre water piece of land that had 40 acres of irrigation on it. And in this particular case, we'll act like it was split nice and even. So there's 20 acres on each of these halves and that the whole thing was gonna get split into 240s. And that now, with the subdivision of the single 80 into two spots, there's one water right still, but it has two separate owners and two separate parcels that are associated with that same once historically larger water right. That was a 40-acre water right. Again, in this case, 20 acres on each new parcel. And so it's a divided interest, and what needs to occur is that, the two owners of that water right have got to have some sort of method in which they could divide that water right, because they might need to do something different to manage their water right. Like maybe one of those folks wants to change their portion of the water right to something new. Maybe one of the other folks is like, well, I need to put I want to try to apply to put a different head gate in a different location because with this division, it's difficult, property access wise to get to the old arrangement, those kind of things. And so the state looks at those as ownership updates, and they are under that umbrella. And they have a wizard that allows things to go through this split or divided interest arrangement. And furthermore, if somebody wants to sell their property, but they don't want to sell that water right, they want to hold on to that water right, then they could sever the water right from the parcel and hold it separately, absent some kind of a formal severance of the water right. The water rights just are automatically appurtenant to the land. They travel with the land absent a severance. So, and that is considered also by the state under this umbrella of ownership updates. And that gets a little more complicated for us because the tribes have certain water rights that are partially on trust lands, but shared with other owners that are on fee lands. So you have water rights that are on both types of lands. And there may be, an emphasis for the tribes to do the divided interest because perhaps they want to either convert their portion to become part of the tribal water right that, held in trust. And they have that opportunity through the compact. And so those are some of the complications that we're just going to need to work through how those details are going to shake out. And obviously it'll take the tribes, it'll take state, it'll take our office to find good and adequate solutions.
Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did that get at enough of the ownership update, Mr. Vice Chairman? Or
Yeah.
did you have any? Okay, good deal. Next, I'll give you a quick update on state-based registrations. As far as I understand, the state of Montana is still planning to transfer to you, to your Helena office, the state-based registrations on April the 28th. And we've heard nothing different so far. Shortly thereafter, our office will be looking to engage regarding the MOU between our office and the board on a standardized practice, just a administrative practice in which we can actively request state-based registrations that are pending and suspended from your file system. So that we could then take ownership of those applications and process them pursuant to the terms of the compact. We are looking, we have kind of a setup way to move forward, that we would like to have some standard batching to be able to request things typically by water right number, but also be able to request things outside of batching for high, priority, situations. High priority situation will be when we want to issue or resolve a pending or suspended state-based registration because primarily of one of two reasons. It's not always just these two, but our office has got the policy that you have directed us to have, which is that we will resolve pending and suspended rights before we issue new ones, which I think is good business. And so that means anytime somebody comes in and they've applied for a new water right, we are quickly moving through to address also their suspended or pending water rights, in advance of that. Part of the reason that we want to do that is to make sure that we don't overstep the requirements set forth in your WPMPs regarding that maximum annual volume limitation for permit exceptions. So there will be no way for us to manage that situation if we don't bring forward things that have been filed but not reviewed, at that time. We do also look for unfiled permit exceptions when we go through, every time we touch a piece of property that has a new water right application, we do a substantial amount of research to look for unauthorized uses, pending and suspended uses, and look at the new uses. So I hope that helps to explain how we are typically looking to triage things and select certain records that you'll have. Okay.
Just maybe it's just for me, to remind us, just for the record, state what exactly are state-based registrations?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, board members, state-based registrations are a group of three types of uses that were set forth in the compact to be able to. They were uses that predated the effective date of the compact that were able to be brought forward, and to be processed by our office. And so I'll remind you, all of the registrations that we manage, the tribal registrations and the state-based registrations, were all uses that were in occurrence before the effective date, okay? The state-based registrations are limited to these three categories. The first category would be pre-1973, what were historically exempt uses. And I'm going to go down I'm just going to put my finger or my toe in the rabbit hole for this, but the exempt uses are direct from source stock uses and domestic uses that were in occurrence before 1973. And the state has perpetuated an allowance for those uses to continue to occur without an actual water right. So that's why they are a true exempt use. Sometimes it's confusing because we talk about exempt wells, which are really kind of exceptions to a permit. These exempt uses are such that you didn't have to file anything with anybody and you can just keep doing this, right? And several times throughout state history, and most importantly, the last one, House Bill 110, allowed people to take their historic exempt uses and bring them forward by filing, what amounts to a statement of claim with the Montana DNRC to be moved through the Montana Water Board. Okay, there had been some other previous filings, and that was set up so that that exempt use could go from being an exempt use to being a water use that is protected by a water right, which is something different. And because of the exempt uses, you could not make a call or assert control over other water users. If you were to convert that to a claim, would then have a priority date, and you'd be in the queue for purposes of a distribution project, okay? Or that would be in order of priority. So here on the reservation, after the compact, however, exempt uses did not move forward. And so, across the rest of the state, even if somebody didn't file, they could continue to do their exempt uses. Here on the reservation, everything needed to have a water right. And so it was set forth that people who hadn't filed anywhere else would be able to do this last registration filing for those exempt uses, because in the absence of that, they would no longer be able to continue that, those types of uses. Is that good enough? That was, okay, right. So, now, that's one of the three categories. The other category would be the 602 exempt groundwater certificates. And those had an annual volume limitation that was up to 10 acre feet of groundwater. Those had to be, by the time that they got filed, they would have already had to been hooked up and put to use. Okay. So, because the 602 filings are notices of completion, which is a little different than the claim filings for those other uses, the exempt uses. And so the notices of completion would include the entire gamut of groundwater uses allowed under that permit exception across the rest of the state. And so, unlike the board's forward-going domestic allowances, which would be the closest equivalency, 602s could include things like small groundwater ponds, larger amounts of pasture irrigation associated with the use, and things that would be up to 10 acre feet without imposing any of the water measurement requirements that you might associate with a development domestic allowance. Okay. So that's category number 2. Some of those were filed with the state before the effective date, and those are in a suspended status category. Some were filed during a 180-day period afterwards, and those are in the pending category. And it's the permit. The other so that's category 1. Category 2 of the registrations. Category 3 of the registrations, for which there are very few, is 605 stock water use, and we only have 2 on the reservation, and those were able to be brought forward as registrations as well. Am I doing good enough? There's kind of a, yep, all right. There's a lot to unpack on registrations, and I'm trying to give you enough, but not too much. Oh, there's a bunch of them, 2,800 something total. So it's a large amount of the workload. On that note, I can move on to talking a little bit about the IT front. And I'm gonna see if I can get Ms. Palmer to put up there. I put a new document in our in here that is called the strategy report. Thank you for pulling that up. So Friday before last, I met with our IT folks for an annual strategy meeting, and we talked about what some of the forward-going needs and the issues are. They've produced this annual report that's very, I think, useful for us. It helps to track the kind of tickets that we start with them. It helps to keep track of our computers and where we are with age and operating systems. And it is also, this particular one is designed to be a follow-up to what the original contract established and contemplated, which is that there would be a monthly fee increase that would start to incur after we started adding more endpoints and additional security aspects. And so, the real take home on this particular item is that, number one, we have a handful of computers, including two board member computers, I think it is, that are still operating under Windows 10, and we're going to need to move those forward to Windows 11 Pro, which is a first step that we need to take. The second step that we really need to take to address forward-going IT issues is we're going to need to purchase some enhanced Microsoft licenses that allow for a new security deployment. And then the third bit is that our IT folks are going to deploy enhanced security protections that are designed to help address some of the new and modern threats. Trying to keep this short until you ask questions, or if you ask questions.
Go back to that previous bar chart. That's pretty informative. If you can explain that was pretty cool display.
Yeah, okay, and I agree with you that this is super useful. And so what we have here on this bar chart is we have a list of the types of tickets that are initiated from our office with the IT folks, and then the bars themselves are the amount of time that was spent resolving the tickets. Okay, so when we're down in the red zone, we see that we had issues with printing and scanning, and that was primarily trying to address critical complications between operating under the state of Montana's virtual private network and our own network. That has taken a lot of time. We have had some SharePoint issues where some of the SharePoint items hadn't worked as well as planned, or people outside of our organization, such as the fiscal, had to get some support for SharePoint issues. We have had some issues on getting Microsoft 365 configured appropriately for the way that I like to manage everyone's login information, especially for our office staff. We need to have an ability for our machines to be able to be logged in by anybody. When you log in to any of our machines under your staff identifier, it will automatically be syncing your desktop and your documents folders with the cloud OneDrive, so that if Sydney does some work over here on this machine and then does some other work over on our other machine, there's kind of a seamless transition. Furthermore, because it's backed up in the cloud, Sydney's done a huge amount of work over a 3-day period, and then her hard drive dies, she can sign on a different machine, and the work that she had done will be preserved, so we don't lose essential time spent, money spent, production because of broken machinery. And furthermore, our IT folks take an additional step to back up certain file structures that we use, such as our main SharePoint files. And most staff that are working on something big will not actually keep the stuff just on their desktop or their documents. The intention is that you would work off of our SharePoint, which is doubly backed up. And that is one of the services that our IT folks also provide. And so, sorry to go down that rabbit hole there a bit. I think that helps. And did you?
Yeah,
Yes.
The bottom line is the hours, I think, and up on the top, Sydney, if you can go up. So we spent 120 hours in support with First Call this past years, but that's telling us. And then it's kind of just a breakdown the bars represent the amount of time, but can you back up to the next? I had a question on the previous slide to this one. So on this budget, the M365, is that the upgrade then from Windows 10 to Windows 11?
No, the upgrade from Windows 10 to Windows 11 should be free for us.
Okay.
And this is the enhanced, like currently we have M365 business standard, and we have to go to an upgraded version of that.
So the price for each upgrade is $12.50. What's the extended price?
I think that what he has done here, okay, a couple of things. First of all, we've been paying for our own Microsoft separately from First Call. And we got into that arrangement because of the sticky mess that we had previously with another contractor. And that allows us to have free and clear transport if we needed to move and transition to new services, right? And so even though they've got this captured here for us, this is really not an expense that we would see through First Call. And the second bit is that I think that the extended price is if I'm not totally sure on this one.
And the Microsoft Entra, that's the security stuff.
No, the Intra is, we're a little over my head, but it's an additional service that is needed for them to deploy their management software, not so much the security software. They are interlinked, and we only have to pay for that for one license for that. So that's just $9 a year.
Maybe we can seek clarification on what they're following,
Sure.
and then the color coding.
That's the number of hours, and I will go up to the top of this again. I want to tell you guys though that this is only the support ticket hours, and they actually provide a whole bunch of other support beyond just these. These are just the tickets if there's a line item, but they are also constantly working to get our backups up to order, to do the maintenance that we need for updates and upgrades and that kind of thing. Okay.
The color coding.
And as the bars go down, the color coding is just like thresholds on hours. So I don't know why Sean picked where he picked the color coding, but it looks pretty. Those could all be gray, and it would still really mean the same thing. What he did mention to me is like, well, they start getting a little nervous on the red because at that point, they're having to struggle to make ends meet for what they're charging us to the time that we're using. And so it is better for our organization to be thoughtful about when we do call in with tickets, and to just, certainly here in-house, we have an arrangement where we take care of some things in-house that we could also ask them to do through tickets, but it's mostly because I don't want to extend past their threshold, because then they'll just start charging us more.
Well, the largest number of hours under scan, what's a typical ticket per scan?
So the scanning and the printing was all one big project where they were trying to sleuth out, solve for this issue of our computers being hooked up to the state of Montana's virtual private network, VPN, to get into the database, but having us unable to print at the same time. And so they spent a lot of time trying to figure that out. And we do have one workaround solution to that. So it requires us to be hardline attached through docking stations, and we're working on getting that all implemented. My hard line, I'm sorry, like attached through an actual network cable. You'll remember that we wired this building with a bunch of network cables, and they all go to a switch in the closet in there. And that design allows us to be hooked up to a VPN, but still have direct access to our printer. And the reason that's important is because when you have a client in your office who's looking for water right information, we often print their water right abstract or do other, there's a lot of printing of water rights that occur in a water right office. If you didn't have an ability to print while you're hooked up to through the state VPN, then you have to save your file as a PDF somewhere, unhook from the VPN, print the PDF, then hook back into the VPN. The VPN itself has got a multitude. It's like 2 tiers of security, so it's not like a real, quick attachment or anything. It takes a while, so it's inefficient to.
So does this report cover all of the time we've been in contract with them, or does it cover a certain time period?
This covers the last year up until the meeting or so. See, 2024, yeah.
All right.
These are different, this is just kind of a list of different tickets that were up and started and contacts. I asked them to stop sending out the phishing emails because it was too confusing for everybody, and they would try to send, it's a great security check, but there wasn't like a good feedback loop. So they would send out these fake phishing emails that were very good. And then you guys were diligent, and so you kept asking me, like, hey, I received this bad email, and so like really, it's great to have that, but it was also really killing my productivity because there wasn't like a good way where you could just like click on a report phishing and then it would say, ta-da, you won, or oh man, this does look sketchy. Either being a fake one, ta-da, you won, you recognized a phishing thing, or this fake one. I think here in the future, we're gonna probably need to press ourselves again to do some security training. I have instead wanted them to focus on proactive training where you sit down through online tutorial once a month to like, oh, this is how people are getting you, right? Because that's what you want to know, right? How they getting you and what not to click on. And talking with Sean, the number one way that people get ransomware and malware into their system is people click on the bad link in an email. So it's a human, it's a human route. And most of my emphasis so far has been trying to set us up to recover from that if it did happen. But as we go forward, we might need to have.
I've been thinking about this. I'm just gonna ask you. So the discussion, we're getting a little bigger, a little busier, maybe a lot busier. Do we need an IT staff and or find a way to contract for someone to sort of be our IT person? Not that a lot of what we're doing can't be done by you and your staff, but looking at the bigger picture, having an IT person seems like it would take a lot off your hands and it would allow someone to focus on IT.
I can say that for like 7 different tasks that are like, the
No,
reason, like when you guys contact me and you think I'm not doing anything, Just because it's one of these other 7 things that we have to keep going. Sydney is our web,
I've
our web
never
person,
assumed that you're not doing it.
right?
But, and I understand that might be true for other items, but I'm asking about this one.
Yeah, I think that it could either like really help us out, or it could go the opposite way. And the reason I just bring it up that way is, I've seen, an array of different IT, support functions in different jobs that I've had, and some of them were just like an amazing asset to have. Some of them maybe cause more problems than it was
No,
worth.
I get it.
So
So the answer is
this is a thought.
actually yes.
Yes, and this is a thought. Frakes has the ability to run the IT gauntlet for us. He is currently assigned to something else though. And he did help to serve that role when he was here. So that may be an easy, solve, is to have, when, because presumably he's not gonna be working on this database for the rest of our lives. But that, and it is something that can be accomplished remotely for the most part. Or we can look at something else. We can look at contracting locally. I would take either. Yeah.
Well, thoughts?
Yeah, I see a definite benefit to having some, and I understand your
Yeah.
concerns, but, I think you can create a job description to address those concerns and agreements. So you get someone serving in that capacity in IT is truly constructive. They pay for themselves every day. I know this gets you.
So I was gonna ask Rhonda, can you look up and see how much we spent on our contract with, I guess that wouldn't be representative, the first call last year, but it sounds like Ethan's spending a considerable amount of time doing IT stuff. So, which really,
We spent $12,960 plus a one-time charge for, I think, around $500.
yeah, it's just trying to get a handle on that. So that would really only maybe be a fifth of an IT salary person, but, I think your points are good, that we do need to move. Your time needs to be spent doing more water rights stuff than IT stuff, that's for sure. So,
Just as, one thing to consider though, like the services that they're providing us wouldn't be something that we
Yeah.
could replicate in-house.
that's true.
And so like, when you're talking about an IT person, that would be, somebody filling just that part-time gap that I spend at as the local manager of the IT. Like, we still have got, like, they are doing backups and they
Yeah,
have.
I'm not talking
giant
about
stuff.
replacing them.
All
I
right,
don't
good,
think, I don't think Roger's talking about replacing them. I was talking about concept of having an IT person, whether it's a contractor or a staff person, and maybe we start with a temporary contractor and just go from there. Because I think my impression is that we're not gonna get less busy. We're gonna get more busy.
Yeah,
So,
And the stuff's getting more sophisticated.
yeah, so let's explore that. I mean, I don't know what you need to do to explore that. It would be my our suggestion. I know we're not taking action here, but we'll just start thinking about that, start figuring out what that might look like. Let's do that. I mean, your thought about James, I mean, maybe just have that conversation with him, maybe even Roger can have that conversation with James and just start there, explore that as an option, because, if that's a doable, only question with James is, where is he and where's he gonna be? I mean, he's moving, right? He's leaving the state.
Yeah, I mean, this would contemplate him working for us from Colorado.
Yeah.
And,
But those kind of things, let's just explore it. I mean, you know, we've got, I think about that, I think about other organizations. I happen to know an organization that runs an entire dam and power facility. They have no offices. Zero. And they have people all over the country and they run that effectively and efficiently. So let's explore it.
Good one.
Please.
Certainly. On the where we're at right now front, though, the one news I do need to give you is that, there is gonna be a cost increase. So, and that was a cost increase that was expected when we engaged, with this company. That would happen after the first year. We'll go from spending, 1,080 for our monthly, amount to 1,325. So there's, to me, considering the number of end users that we've increased and the sophistication of the threats that they've been protecting us from, that's a $2,940 increase. It's pretty reasonable. So it is something that we've got to have to factor into the budget. And it's also like, I do want to keep them happy. We're one of the smallest of their clients, and so it's important for us to, and I think they like us, and that's great.
What's their increase? Did they say, or they just?
Yeah,
say
sure.
they're gonna have an increase?
If you could go a little farther along in the document here. There's. Here we go. Okay. So the increase is, associated with this 14 endpoints. The original agreement was 7. Okay. We've got
Endpoints being computers. The number of computers.
yep, we've got the big. They've really tried to keep us, if you look at the real price difference on the endpoint increase, we're on minus 2. I mean, for the increase in endpoints, we're really only jumping up from 1,080 to 1,110, which is super reasonable. And he worked really hard to be able to give us this. The expense, though, that we're not going to be able to get away with from is that enhanced defense additions, that additional $215, and that is because they're spending a ton of money trying to manage this new AI world of threats and trying to keep, the security up to date. And so we're really.
And that's just the one-time charge. That's an annual fee.
Not
a monthly fee.
No, that's monthly. The 215 is a monthly fee.
Now, just, unless I'm mistaken, it's the 1080 by 7 is about $25 a month. 1325 or 14, that's about 90.
No, that 1080 is per month.
For 7.
Yeah, that was, oh, sorry.
seven.
I didn't
So
track
you
what you were doing.
1325 by 14, that's like 94, so there's also a per unit increase. It's quite a jump, actually.
So that increase, is per machine, right? So we then need to multiply 1325 by 14 to get to an annual.
And we're actually dropping significantly on the per end user fee. We're dropping when we were paying 1080 for 7, and then we started paying, we're gonna start paying 13.25 for 14.
Well, I punched my numbers wrong.
Yeah, that drops us from like 154 per
154 to
endpoint to
94.
90. Like, we're actually getting a real good deal there. The bummer though is this, the enhanced, defense additions are embedded in that 135 or 1325 number. So even, we're at $94 an endpoint, and we get the enhanced excuse me, the enhanced defenses.
Yeah, I
And
just,
in contrast, there was another contractor that we were working with that
that's right.
was over $2,000 past the first year. So this is, we're still, we're looking, and the service that we're getting here has been, at least in from my desk.
So this is after the first year increase, so are we anticipating they're gonna say an annual increase, or is this locked in for a number of years?
This is for this year, and I think we're at the next strategy meeting, we're gonna have to see what's happening in the world. I mean, I don't think that they're gonna predict their long-term bit past that, because it's hard to tell like how much a computer chip is gonna cost this year, or next year, that kind of stuff.
So one thing that on this enhanced defense deal, there's EDR and there's MDR, but back in the day, when you had a server for all your stuff sitting in your office, you had a built-in firewall. And now that you're in the cloud, that firewall's gone. So that's why you have this enhanced defense, because that's what catches all that malware and everything else that's coming through. And the way he explained it to me too is this is like having a home security system at your house. There's a camera that's always looking at stuff, detecting stuff. And then if it sees something, it sends a message to the police department that notifies them that there's something going on. So it's pretty sophisticated system, and I think it's well working.
Yeah, I guess something I would add to this is these kinds of cyber attacks are rising each year, and they're expecting a 30% increase this year. Most of it's coming from outside of the United States. And I was reading the news this morning, the federal office that has long been assigned the task of looking for outside attacks coming in was closed by DOJ. So that first layer of defense has been removed. And, you're somewhat a low level target here. Research and education gets hit the most. So after that, it's infrastructure. And, so I don't think our office rises to that level of being a target, but
We already did get targeted, our website got locked,
wow.
and that's a different contract. The website, they're also First Call, it's a little complicated. You'll remember, we engaged First Call to build the website. It was such a success that's why we pursued them for IT. But we were able to recover from that because we had a good strategy, a good recovery strategy for that. And just, I don't know, it was a ransomware attack, and it was a lock. And so as we go forward, I'm predicating things on the fact that we have already had, it's not a hypothetical risk for our organization.
We're getting it at college all the time. I'm paranoid. I have every single file I work on is on an external hard drive I carry with me. For that reason, if we get locked out, I can't do my job. So.
So really, this is kind of just an update. These changes were reflected in the original contract that the board and the OE engaged in, and I just wanted to do my best to give you a briefing that there'll be some increased costs. They're, I think, well worth it. I was glad Roger got a chance to hear from Sean, because it's important to know that all this is going on. I mean, because if you didn't look at all these conversations for tickets and time spent and everything, you may not know that all this behind the scenes action is, you know, it's running in the background here for us to keep connection. If we lose our connectivity to Microsoft 365 or our SharePoint files, it will be a significant issue for this organization. That's all I got. I think you wanted to maybe take a break between,
So what's the total cost, you know?
yeah, $15,900 for 2025, and that is an increase from 12,960 up 2,940. Sorry.
What was it?
So we had been paying 12,960 per year. We just jumped to 15,900. And that's an increase of 2,940. I have to do a little bit more work on the Microsoft licensing to tell you exactly what those cost increases are going to be, but they'll be,
So I guess where I'm going with that is just that that's above the limit, so it probably takes board approval, so we should probably, we can't act on it today, but we should. This does need to go into place by May 1, so we should either do a poll or get it on the next agenda for sure. For approval.
sure.
Anything else, Roger? Well, yeah, let's take a break.
Okay, thank you. We took a break. We're back. So Ethan, what we thought and what I'll propose is just to get confirmation. Is we don't want to spend an hour today going through this, but if you could just brief us on what we're looking at. And then the next time we have all the board members together, maybe we can go through it in some detail, because we think they need to be involved as well. Then I think we'll finish up. We'll settle on our next meeting dates, and then we'll go for executive session.
Yeah, Ken and George would really appreciate seeing
Yeah.
this.
You
So,
agree?
yeah,
You good?
definitely.
Okay. All right, Ethan.
All
Please.
right, Mr. Chairman, board members, really what we've been working on in this office is trying to come up with some mock scenarios using fake water rights to protect the name of the real water right owners. The things that we have here, the water right examples that we have are things that we have that are fashioned after actual things that we need to tackle here in our office. And so the idea behind the water right scenarios is to go through the gamut of puzzling challenges that we are faced with on a regular basis to, one, inform the board what is happening, you know, in this office on a day-to-day basis, and two, get the board, you know, moving towards thinking about setting policy for some of the items that we're not able to manage yet. So going in and talking about the conundrums of ownerships and divisions and what happens when you look at a water right, and what happens when somebody calls you and asks, what can I do here? And then also just going into like, all right, let's play some hypotheticals. You know, look at these water right scenarios. Maybe you could bring up the one really campy map that I drew for scenario one. You know, where we have two different parcels, right? Where we have, you know, two different parcels that has a water right on it, and there's, you know, there's ponds, and there's canals, and there's a dry pond, and there's, you know, a claimed place of use, and, you know, you can't quite see it on this one, but, we have, you know, this, Broncos, Buster Broncos parcel here, and a tribal owned parcel here, and, you know, what I'm gonna do whenever you're telling me that you're ready, maybe that sounds like it's when you have more board members, all present, is that I'm gonna go through a list of questions that are the same kind of questions that we get in this office about how do you do this? How about this? What if we need to do this? And I want to go through these very, you know, challenging, hard things to help us, to guide us towards what you ultimately want to see, which is policy development on how to handle things like changes, how to handle things like new permits, you know, and the best way for me to think that we could possibly do that is to just go through some water rights and find out, well, you know, if they wanted to change this, would you consider that to be an expansion of use or not? If they wanted to change this, would you think that that needed to be addressed by the water court or by this office? You know, those kind of questions are every day, you know, in this office. And I think that this will help. You know, it's not intended to put you in an awkward spot or anything. It's intended to get you thinking about this so that you can give me specifically some feedback. Haley will receive that feedback also. We're gonna be the ones that are trying to draft to, you know, how the change policies are gonna look, how the permit policies are gonna look, how ownership update policies are gonna look. And we need to start somewhere by like getting a feel for what you're thinking. And it doesn't mean that just because you felt this way about something one day that you're somehow locked into it or anything. This is intended to be an open dialogue, so we can at least start off in a drafting attempt that, you know, allows you to be like, okay, that's not an unexpected arrangement, or, you know, wow, you just drafted this totally outside of what I would have thought. And that's because, you know, we have some great expertise. We've got some great experience. There's some unique circumstances here. And you have a chance as a board to move forward in a way that does diverge from, you know, the state and how the state has looked at things. And you have a way that you could, you know, and frankly, your permit exceptions for the domestic allowances and stock allowances have some significant differences. The emphasis on allowing for stock water, that's not present somewhere else, you know, anywhere else in the state. You know, the very practical way at which, you know, you decided to look at what properties would be grouped together for purposes of a 10-acre-foot permit exception, annual volume limit. You know, those were unique ideas that this board, you know, was able to work through. As we get into changes, we need a little bit more, you know, from you. I need to get an idea of what you're thinking, of what you'd like to see. And then we're gonna try to, you know, get a little closer to the mark on what policies we think you might like to see. At which point, then you can tear the policies up, or you can like them or whatever. You'll get to actually have that next phase So you're not gonna be overly committed, but it might get us a little closer to where you just see policies that, you know, at least you'll know how to argue amongst yourselves about, right?
Comments, Scott? Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. I think it's a litmus test for some of our WPDs. And do we need to modify those? Do we, you know, and then there's always gonna be an exception to the rule, it seems like, and does it change the rule if you keep it as an exception? And why? It's the important part. So I think, you know, having some examples of the really difficult ones, but even an example of a straightforward one that would just move right through the system. This is the way it's supposed to work. In a clean, single ownership, single this, single that, moves through the process. And then we have a messy one, or, you know, graded into a messy one. Maybe there's a middle example in there too. That, and how frequent will these be? I suspect they'll be more frequent than we care to have them. Because of the complexity of the ownership pattern across the reservation. And we're unique, we're different from the state, you know, from that customer, quality aspect, so good, I think good idea.
Same. We're gonna bump into stuff, I'm sure you already are, so.
And my thoughts went pretty much to that, I think. But I also think that we should probably periodically set a half day aside. You know,
Yeah.
3 or 4 hours. Not just try to say, well, let's squeeze it into an hour, because I do think we need to go sort of a low, medium, and high complication. So let's look at a few simple ones, and 1 or 2 complicated ones, and 1 or 2 really complicated ones, and, you know, tackle them. Yeah, I don't have any issue with that. If that gaming those out, I think would be a good idea for us, and you, whether they become real or not, I think would give us the exercise to look at it from a technical, legal, and a policy standpoint. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, and you know, I think periodically doing this is just good for a refresher.
Yeah.
Of our WPMPs, that as we start getting appeals, we're more familiar with what part applies to this situation. This should be almost a, you know, semi-annual kind of refresher course,
Yeah.
you know, it doesn't have to be over. Maybe the first one, we actually grind through some really complicated things, but in the future, they could be just a refresher.
Yeah, though I think your idea of doing it to help sort of frame up our thinking about what a policy might be, I think that's a good approach.
And I think this can take more than an hour. I think a work session is a good idea for this.
Yeah. All right. Good enough?
Yep.
Now, anything, Haley? Any more questions? Okay. Next meetings. April 30, May 14, at least for this crew, are we good? Or?
I'll be on Zoom. Yeah.
Good on the 30th. What was the other one, May 14th?
14th is
Zero, Zoom went
the 30th.
in Tucson again? Oh, goodness. I move that our next meeting is in what town are you in?
Kona.
I move our next meeting is in Kona, Hawaii.
I'll second that.
Do you have a budget for that? Yes, great. We'll just bring the whole staff.
Yeah. I don't think the condo's big enough.
Howard Rogers.
Oh, that'll be able to stay on the beach.
What do you need a combo?
Yeah,
That's why.
so the 30th and then May 14th, so at least for the 4 of us, we're good.
What time on the 30th? Does it work for Jen just in the afternoon?
This was so based on that spreadsheet that I put together, this was the time that's best for everybody. That 9 to 1 on Wednesdays in particular.
Okay,
Yes,
but it didn't work for Jen.
not on Thursdays.
But
On Wednesdays it does.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
9 to 1. Sorry, Haley, you have to speak loud, use small words and repeat yourself with me today. So,
No, it's all good. That, I'm trying to even remember all of your guys' schedules.
Was it any, those days or anything like today, I'm gonna have to call you before I leave.
I have to teach a staff.
I forgot. Yeah.
Start right person right now. Thank goodness I have really smart students. I'm just gonna look at them and go.
Anything else? Anything else?
I'll check in with you. Do you wanna try to add another Wednesday 9 to 1 for the water right scenarios? So your next meeting will be super busy. I think there was 9 decision items that was on this agenda, so and we have a focal point of that. Hopefully the funding agreement, so I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
and I'm hearing you guys want to move forward with some policy.
Yeah,
I'm trying to, otherwise you want to like commit the May 14th to the, you want to just plan on doing the water right scenarios on May 14th, or do you want to pick something in between, the April and May meeting?
I think for the water rate scenario, we should maybe do a poll so that we know that Ken can't be here in the mornings on Thursdays, so maybe we should do another poll to see when everybody can fit it into their schedule. Because
Yeah.
having Ken and George here for that water right thing, that's gonna be really important.
yeah, and then George, he's laid up right now, so I don't know how long he's gonna be laid up. Maybe a couple of week. So, yeah, that's something. And so those 2 dates for now and test the waters, we will poll to see when we can call it a working session to talk about scenarios and policy. Anything else? Anybody else? You guys have anything for us? Motion to adjourn.
So move.
Motion,
Second.
second, all in favor, say aye. Even though we can't take action. We just did.
We did something.
Habit.
We
Yeah.
did something.